Hi everyone, I'm Callie and I'm here with Miguel Concepcion and we're checking out Final Fantasy XII, The Zodiac Age, the remaster of the almost 10-year-old Final Fantasy XII that came out on PS2. Miguel, tell me what we're looking at here.
Well, we are at Ariat Village. My apologies if I butchered these these locations and character names. I've never actually taken the time to read up on the proper pronunciation, but
that's okay.
As you can see, we are checking out Final Fantasy XII in a rather cleaned up, very, very polished look. I mean, for a game that actually already looked pretty darn good for a PlayStation 2 game, especially when the console was at least like 8 years old by the time this game came out.
Mm-hmm. But now it's looking even sharper. So one thing you were telling me about is people checking out some abs. What's that about?
Yeah, there were some issues about Vaughn's abs from the original game. And according to some of my coworkers who have been watching me play, apparently they've been improved or fixed.
Fixed.
As far as protagonist abs go.
Washboard abs. Yeah, so if you played the US version, this remaster has some totally new updates and upgrades, but it also has stuff from international versions that if you played in the US, you wouldn't have seen. So it's kind of a combination of those two things, which is really, really cool. And also we get to speed up, which I love.
It was a feature in the international version, but I think we're currently watching it at 2x speed. I don't know if 4x speed was available in the international version, but now you can actually play it 4x the speed.
I'm also loving the number of bunny girls in this game.
Yes, this is Franz Village.
So I never played Final Fantasy XII, so I'm excited to play it this time around and just revisiting it for you, where you played how many hours of Final Fantasy XII the first time around?
It must have been at least 200.
Nice.
Partly having to do with being able to take my characters all the way up to level 99 with a minimal amount of input, as we discussed in the previous video.
Yeah, so if you want to check out more Final Fantasy XII, we do have more of an in-depth look at the battle system, but right now we're just going to do some exploring and talk about some general changes and improvements and all that stuff. But be sure to check that video out too, because the battle system is really, really unique and cool. We might touch on it a little bit here, but that's probably the thing I'm most excited about is the battle system.
Yes, I'm about to head off into actually the jungle.
The jungle.
Which, if you are really into Final Fantasy, but you just somehow skipped Final Fantasy 12, you should be able to find some similar or some very familiar enemies. Mm-hmm. You have cacti, you've got bombs. I mean, it's very much, the aesthetic is very much keeping in line with the Ivalice world that we saw from Final Fantasy Tactics and Vagrant Story, but I believe just on the quality alone, it certainly earned its place as a mainline Final Fantasy game, despite how much of an aesthetic departure it was.
Where does it rank among your favorite Final Fantasy games?
I didn't really even need to think. It's actually my favorite.
Ooh, it's your favorite?
Among all of them.
Okay, I've heard that from some people when I ask, because I'm, despite what you would expect of a weeaboo like me, I've never played a Final Fantasy game. So whenever I ask people, like, where should I start, it's usually, like, people say 6 a lot of the time. And then when I ask about favorites, a lot of people bring up 12. So I was really excited to hear that there would be a remaster.
So in relation to other Final Fantasy games, well, Final Fantasy games are they get away with each installment having its own self-contained story. I mean, that's the beauty of Final Fantasy games, is that they're not tied to others, except when they, I think it was the trend started with Final Fantasy X, where they had 10-2. This game, Final Fantasy XII, I would have loved to have had more spin-offs aside from the Final Fantasy XII game that you ended up getting on the Game Boy Advance. But if you're a big fan of Vagrant Story and Final Fantasy Tactics, you could definitely see some very similarities, especially when the initial director, the character designer, and the guy who did the music all worked on Vagrant Story and Final Fantasy Tactics. So you should be able to like notice some aesthetic and music similarities, especially with Vagrant Story, because those games came out maybe like about 6 years apart from each other.
Yeah. We talked about this in a little bit in our video about the battle system. We talked about character a little bit in that video too, but I do really want to explore, like, for somebody who put 200 hours into this game the first time around, why revisit it now? Like, is it something that is worth looking back on because it has a lot of elements that work together really well, like the battle and the story and things that work together for a Final Fantasy game, or is it something else?
Well, this would be a great opportunity to actually transition into what they call the Trials mode.
Okay. Let's go.
I'm of the opinion that, and at the risk of sounding very cornball about it, there's a certain timelessness to the game, and the foundation is the battle system. 1 sec.
It's all good.
And
We're just
also
doing a quick overview of everything.
and
So
also
we saw battle exploration,
that
trial.
this world of Ivalice, this roughly loosely shared universe that doesn't involve Final Fantasy Tactics and Vagrant Story. Final Fantasy 12, I believe, is sort of the best example, features like the best examples of those worlds, especially being like one of the last games to come out from that game project.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And for someone like me who has never played a Final Fantasy, do you think it would be a good idea to play this first, or should I start somewhere else?
You know, despite this being like my favorite Final Fantasy, this isn't what I would consider a good gateway Final Fantasy, just because of how drastically different the battle system is.
Right.
You know,
I mean, I'm versed in JRPGs, so like I'm not a JRPG newbie, so I'm very intrigued by the battle. But for Final Fantasy, for somebody who's never played this game, who's never played Final Fantasy, or maybe hasn't played a Final Fantasy in a while, you're saying this isn't the best gateway, despite being your favorite.
No.
Okay.
No.
That's good to know. I'm glad to know that.
I mean, the battle system is about as is so foreign compared to most of the other Final Fantasies. Very much in the same way that the battle system of Final Fantasy 15 isn't anything like anything you've experienced in the other games. I think a lot of the single-digit Final Fantasies, I mean, aside from Final Fantasy 8, should be about a good gateway installment as any. So, like, what we're looking at right now is what they call the Trials mode, which is just these rounds of battles.
And what do you get from it, if just doing rounds of battles?
Well, you do get some experience.
Okay.
And, you know, actually, now that I think about it, I haven't had a chance to actually read up on what the main benefit is, but, you know, it's definitely a nice way to showcase the different environments and the different enemies. And
especially when we're thinking about a remaster, seeing these environments looking sharper and nicer. It's a nice little tour of that.
Oh, yeah. And
also, look at these boys. I love them.
And again, if you are a Final Fantasy aficionado, you should be able to recognize some enemies. You know, one of the nice things about, you know, Final Fantasy games is that the art team or the art director of each respective Final Fantasy, they do their own twist on familiar Final Fantasy enemies. And this would be a nice time to also just showcase the gambits that these characters are working on. Fran has a very straightforward support. Well, actually, everyone is pretty strong in support.
So these are the scripts you've written. We do go into this much more in depth in another video about the battle system, but
Yeah,
Yeah, so you have them kind of focused on support. You're
They're
kind of
all-
letting them do their thing.
they're all animated. Here I am gesticulating. I'm not even putting my hands
Yeah,
on the controller.
I can attest to the fact that you are not even touching the controller right now.
But at the same time, because these are my gambits, these are my commands, I still feel invested in the moment.
And that's something that intrigues me so much about that game. That this game that makes me kind of want it to be my first Final Fantasy is that is so unique and so interesting that I'm willing to bypass my better judgment and just kind of go for it. Especially from everything you've told me about this game, I am really, really intrigued. And I know I'm 10 years too late to the party, but if you out there watching are like me, I am curious. Let me know in the comments if you also have never played a Final Fantasy and would feel comfortable starting here, just with that battle system alone, which is so cool.
Maybe I'm that age where I've stopped giving people a hard time for like skipping over a certain game. It's like, better late than never.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, you can't possibly have time to play every game. There's just no way, and this is a hefty RPG. We talked about in the other video too, like having an option to speed up gameplay.
Oh yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, so let's speed it up here. While
Make sure it's ×4.
Yeah, while they're kind of doing their thing with their gambits. I think that's also a really cool addition, especially if the time sync is a bit intimidating to you. So that's another thing that makes me kind of just want to like stop and play this and kind of take a break from the other games I've been playing. Just because that, like, this 4x speed could help shorten the amount of time you're leveling up or doing anything and help get rid of that hurdle, I think.
And, this is something you just need to be careful with, because if you're only, say, like 5, 8, 10 hours into the game, you may not have all the ideal gambits. Well, you'll at least have the essential gambits, but you'll probably end up it's not to say that this game is going to be easy. You're probably going to be doing some fine tuning throughout the journey, and
like, you're not just going to be watching, you're going to be learning from what you've written, the gambits that you've set up, and tweaking as you go and seeing what works and what doesn't. Which is just a cool take on a battle system that's less about like inputs and more about pre-planning.
One thing I do look forward to taking on eventually is that there is a dragon type boss later in the game. He's optional. He was named after the original director of this game.
Really?
And it takes about, as I recall, 6 hours to beat.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's definitely one reason why it's such a nice thing that you could be hands off.
Yeah.
While still having a sense of ownership with your character's progress and success.
Right. It's
and
not
failures.
like it's just totally playing for you. You did the setup, which is super cool. All right. I know I've said it before, but we have another video about that, more in depth, that you can check out, including the licenses system, which has been revamped for this version. But we have to wrap up, so make sure you subscribe to GameSpot on YouTube, because we have that other video on Final Fantasy XII Zodiac Age, along with other things coming out. This game is coming out not for a little while, so
July 11th.
July 11th. So subscribe so you don't miss anything in the interim. And thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
See ya.